Hey everyone, welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's January 11th, 2023. My name's Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse is a DevOps accelerator. That means we help companies conquer AWS using our proven blueprints for Terraform. If you're turning to AWS or already on it and want to level up what you're doing, check out what we have here at Cloud Posse. You can go to cloudposse.com/quiz to book a session with me directly, and I'll show you what your future can look like. For those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. If you're curious about Cloud Posse or any of our open source tools or modules, this is a great place to ask. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a recording of the session to our YouTube channel. If you enjoy the content and want to support what we do, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. Just go to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, youtube.com/cloudposse. So with that said, let's kick things off. I have a few announcements. It's not been as boring a week as last week. The first announcement here is the long-awaited quick start for Atmos. Our first pass edit has been released. You could go to atmos.tools, click the quick start link here, and it'll walk you through the process of setting it up from scratch. That is installing Atmos, any of the dependencies you need, configuring the Atmos configuration, setting up your first stacks, provisioning it, and guiding you to the next steps. So if you've been curious about it, but haven't had a chance to scratch the itch, now is the time to try it. Let us know if you have problems. It is a public repository. We accept any corrections or issues that you might have in the process. The other documents we've updated, one is using remote state. So what's interesting about Atmos is Atmos obviously is written in Go. It has its own library. We use that library to create a Terraform provider. That Terraform provider can read all of your Atmos configurations and understands, therefore, where your Terraform root modules, your components, are deployed. So we wrote up how you can use this to very easily access the remote state of any other components in Terraform. Let's see here where the root of meat of the example is. Yeah, here. So here's an example of using the remote state module, which uses our provider to easily query the state of any component. So let's say you have a VPC flow log bucket that has been deployed somewhere, like centralized in a centralized account, and you want to get the outputs of that component. Well, it's quite simply to just refer to this module. Actually, these are just examples on how to override them if you need to override them. If you don't need to override them, you don't need to specify any of these settings here. And then you can access the outputs of this just as you would any other module. So here we're accessing the outputs of the bucket here and getting the ARN of the bucket. So this is a more advanced example of how to use the remote state. In its simplest case, it's a lot easier than that. It's literally just a few lines of Terraform code to get the remote state of any component within your same account. Linda, I think we should add a task to document how to do remote state within the same account, a simpler example to start, and then build up to this more advanced example that we have here.
Okay.
We also published a first pass of a cheat sheet. This is just showing you the most common commands that, the most common commands that you might interact with when you're using Atmos. Commands like how to install tab completion, this works, but it doesn't extend to all the functionality you might expect right now. But describing components, describing your configurations, how to deploy Terraform components, how to start a shell, which has all the environment set up. So if you start this shell, you can just run vanilla Terraform. It'll just work as though you're calling Terraform without using Atmos. It'll set up the environment variables correctly. How to use workflows and so forth. So we're going to continue. I think what we're lacking from the cheat sheet are practical examples. This is just an index right now of the commands. We should show some usage along with this cheat sheet. And workflows. So workflows is probably one of the more powerful features of Atmos, and our documentation on that previously was incomplete. It didn't talk about how you could run more complex examples here. So our workflows are inspired by GoTask. GoTask is a standalone task runner. We took a similar schema and built it into Atmos, so you can define a workflow, for example, like this, that'll run a series of commands. The idea is to collect all the knowledge of interacting with your infrastructure and your commands in one place, so they're not spread across a wide range of tools that do similar but different things. So here's an example where you could actually embed a shell script in here if you needed to. Then you can run some Atmos commands and so forth. We use these, for example, at Cloud Posse, we're building up the scaffolding for the environments. And let's see here, stacks, workflows. Here's some real example, like how to download all of the dependencies that are related with the cold start. So we define a workflow, we called it vendor, and then it's calling the Atmos command to download all of the components that we need to bring up that layer. Or to initialize the S3 state backend, for example. So we created a workflow to initialize the Terraform state backend. This is a catch-22, right? Because we're using Terraform to provision the bucket that stores the Terraform state, but we don't have Terraform up and running yet. So you first start with local state, and then you offload it to the S3 bucket afterwards in a secondary application. It's also an example here of we've encountered race conditions where you apply the state backend and the bucket isn't available yet. So we have a intermediary step that just lists the bucket until it's successful, sleeping 5 seconds before we try and import the state back into the bucket. So a practical implementation of a workflow. Any questions on workflows before I continue? All right. So those are the updates on Atmos. If you're using it, check them out. Next one is Matt Calhoun shared with me that S3 has now changed the default policy to encrypt objects by default. I'm curious if this means that, for example, if you're using Terraform, you're suddenly, and the provider's updated, for example, you're going to start seeing drift if you hadn't enabled encryption by default. I don't know what the net effect is.
I don't know if they changed that, if they changed the if they change it for existing buckets or if it's only for new buckets. I didn't read that far. To each new object unless you, yeah. So presumably that sounds like right there, S3 buckets that do not have the paragraph one up, S3 buckets that do not use default encryption will now automatically apply SSE S3 as the default setting. So presumably yes to what you just asked, because it seems like they're going to change the settings of your existing buckets.
Yeah. All right. So heads up on that. Next, because it's not really DevOps related, but I've been a Evernote user for 12 or 13 years now, roughly. And yeah, it's been dying a slow death, but deeply entrenched, and I still like it for note taking. So they were just acquired. I'm hoping that means fresh life will be breathed into the product, and maybe some of the superfluous features that they've introduced are going to be cut out. I know a lot of people have jumped ship onto Notion. I gave Notion a shot. Personally, it wasn't my cup of tea, but I could see why it was very popular for the things it could do. Also, have I been pwned is verified. Also that there has been another leak here, this time with Twitter. 200 million email addresses have been discovered. I don't know if the vector has been determined and how they were extracted.
I read in another article that this may be related to the LastPass leak, that they think that someone who had access to this was compromised as part of the LastPass leak, and then they actually used that person's credentials to gain access to the Twitter emails.
So, but this is just conjecture here. This says that it may have taken place as early as it doesn't say early as 21. It doesn't say when in 21. I read it as early in 2021 because the LastPass leak was pretty late. That'd be interesting. I guess I've been holding out hope for all the LastPass users that yes, your data was leaked, but at least it was encrypted, and hopefully you have some time before they can brute force that. In other news, I saw a post, I don't know if it's probably hard to verify. China breaks RSA. Yeah, I don't know if, this is not published by really any major news outlets. So it's hard to say if it's true or not, but that would be interesting.
Yeah. Although they're saying that they can do it only on quantum computing like power that they have. So
yeah,
I forget. If you read it, it said some crazy number of like CPU cycles that it took to actually crack like one of the keys. Because they're brute force basically.
So can someone explain this to me as an idiot on the space? I thought we were not. I know there's the ability to do quantum emulation, but I don't understand how we're using quote unquote quantum computing at this stage. I didn't think we had quantum computers. I thought the best we could do is virtualization of kind of what quantum computing is, and if it's virtualized, is it really that performant? I mean,
I don't think that that's what China is claiming here, but no one actually knows if this is true or not.
That's true. Well, not even related to this article. I just mean quantum computing in general. Like, I didn't think that this is.
There are a number of computers that have like single-digit qubits, is what they're called.
Okay.
And so there are some very baby quantum computers that are real quantum computers, not emulators or simulation. I used to fly a lot for work, and I sat next to a guy who was a researcher at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and he said that they think it's going to take about 20 to 25 qubits before these problems start really collapsing. But yeah, they are out there right now.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And you can rent one from Amazon through Amazon Bracket.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Oh, Vlad.
Like
you are like an
genuine
encyclopedia of
quantum computers.
AWS services.
Yeah, I'm highly skeptical of this actually being a real thing. I think it's not happening yet. So.
Yeah, I remember that was also what confused me when Amazon came out with AWS Quantum. I didn't understand it because I thought, again, we weren't there. But
I think the only one that exists at any kind of scale that I've read about is the the IBM Q system 1 or whatever, and I think that exists, and it's supposed to have 20 qubits, which is, I
It
think
has
that's the largest. Like,
127 now.
oh, is it up to is it that high
Yeah,
now?
but it's
okay.
the barrier for being like an operational, capacity is like 1,000,000 qubits.
Oh,
So it's at 127 out of 1,000,000.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's and I think when I read, I was surprised how small it was. It's like it's something like 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet or something like that is all it takes up.
It's kind of funny. It's like we're starting all over again with computing at a whole different level, obviously, of complexity. But soon, in 75 years,
Yeah.
that'll be in our pocket. All right, another Terraform registry. I can't keep track of them in my mind. I'm not sure if we brought this one up before, Terralist. It was in Anton Babenko's newsletter this week. Which I should also mention. It looks like I'm drawing a blank. I forget what platform Anton Babenko was using for the newsletter, but they shut down entirely. So that affected a lot of newsletters out there. I guess it was killed by Twitter. So Terralist, what makes it stand out is a REST API for helping you manage your modules and your modules and providers as your own registry. All right. I saw this on Reddit. It was a bit disappointing, I thought. I don't know if let's see what the last comment is here. Maybe it can be reintroduced with plugins. So the gist of it is, back in the day, Lens was a standalone company. The company went belly up. Ultimately, the IP sold to Mirantist. Mirantist is now maintaining Lens. Lens is like a VS Code for your Kubernetes cluster. It's a great UI to interact with if you're getting started with Kubernetes and not necessarily and fluent at navigating the kubectl command line tool. It's great for discovery and so forth. Well, probably the two most useful buttons for debugging when you're using Lens, especially as a newcomer, is the ability to exec into a running pod. Well, that was removed, and the ability to view the logs of a running pod. So using it as a debug thing. The slant of the issue is that they did this because of their commercial offering of Lens, and they're crippling then the open source thing. I don't know if that's true. I haven't read the full comment history here, so I don't want to misrepresent what this is. And then the last post here was, looks like it's possible to have plugins and extensions. And if that's true, well, that sounds like a totally reasonable compromise for it remaining an open product and actually adding support for things. Matt?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there was some nuance in what happened to the licensing of the code when they purchased it. So you can't just refactor the existing code that had that in there, like into a plugin. You would essentially have to write all new code that does the same thing without using the code that exists, because I think that they now own that code and will not allow you to use that in a plugin or something like that. I read that somewhere else.
But I would agree with that. I would assert that that's the correct thing. How do you say? You could not reuse the version of code that was licensed under the new license, but in the original versions of Lens, if that functionality was there, and that was, for example, licensed MIT or something, then that would be reusable, right? You can't relicense retroactively code that is in the public. That sounds dangerous if so.
Yeah, that probably makes sense.
I'm not a lawyer though, so
Yeah. That probably makes sense as long as there wasn't some restriction. As long as you have it from before, I guess, yeah.
Mm.
Is that Mirantist? That was the OpenStack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that Mirantist. Yeah.
Yep.
That also bought Docker, or part of Docker.
Yeah, they were looking to change after OpenStack failed and Kubernetes was their next big thing.
Yeah. Just a random novelty post. Don't go out there and, put this into production. I just came across it. Thought it was a fun mashup of tooling out there. It's a Slack bot, I believe, to interpret your Prometheus errors with ChatGPT, so it can give you some ideas for remediation and resolution. Because all of us don't have the wonderful playbooks sufficient to be able to remediate all those alerts. So kind of basically thinking of ChatGPT for playbooks is kind of a cool idea. What were you saying, Matt?
Why don't you just ask ChatGPT to execute the playbooks for you?
Yeah, just blindly, like pipe bash, ChatGPT pipe bash, sudo bash, by the way, sudo bash.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Oh, we are not far away from that. I know how insanely scary that sounds from a security perspective, but I'm sure somebody's already doing something like that. There is already the tool to generate Terraform code, right? From ChatGPT.
Yeah. Well, that's the person who doesn't read the giant warning where it says like, we may give you a message that sounds plausible, but actually isn't factually correct.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, do this, and then all of a sudden something disappears, and you're like, I didn't ask you to do that. Oh, sorry. I don't know. I'm a little like skeptical on it right now.
Yeah. Oh, and just closing the loop, since we talked about ChatGPT last week, I believe it was, and we talked about that Google. This is a existential threat for Google. Some brought up that, well, Google, it's not really, because Google doesn't want to see this succeed. Google wants to have people clicking around on links and getting the ad revenue on that. Well, within the same day or so, it was announced that Microsoft is seeking out a partnership to enhance Bing with results from ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah. Did you see the latest news that Microsoft got? Yeah.
Well, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say they announced that they're going to invest $10 billion in OpenAI, and they're going to do a profit share until they get their $10 billion back, and then they end up owning 49% of Chat.
I saw that announcement.
API.
Yeah, I saw that announcement. I wasn't sure that was a done deal, though. Was that?
I think from what I've heard, it's pretty close to either done or done. One of the two. They were an initial funder.
They were, yeah,
of the product and everything else, and when it started, yeah. So,
yeah.
And given what we talked about before the holidays, which was the last what's this called? Office hours call that I was on. I think the compute is ridiculous how much they spend on a daily basis to run all of this stuff. So I think that Microsoft helping along those fronts and infusing cash into the thing so that they can actually commercialize the product as they've talked about makes a lot of sense, at a high level.
Yeah. This is a real sunshine story. What a moonshot that succeeded for them. I mean, they did raise $1 billion to build it from prominent investors or whatnot. But I'm still happy just to see just how meteoric their success was once they went live.
I bet if you gave me $1 billion, I could do some really interesting things.
I wouldn't put it past you, Matt.
That's a lot of money to deploy. You could solve
It
a lot of
is.
problems with $1
Yeah.
billion.
Yeah.
You just gotta
Yeah.
win the Mega Millions. You'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Start a cryptocurrency. Oh wait, no, that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
So what was that,
Not
Matt?
that I want to get off on a tangent, but anyone who didn't see, yeah, Matt calling. There you go, Jim. Anything that anyone who didn't see cryptocurrency as a bigger problem in general, when any currency that has a finite amount and you can't generate more, just doesn't work in a macroeconomic perspective, because the idea is that, as you do more with the currency, obviously you grow the entire output and the commerce ecosystem. So at some point, like, if you run out of currency, what's going to happen? Like, you can only be in an inflationary state at that point. You can never have like a stable currency based on like cryptocurrency, which is kind of like a weird thing. But I don't know. I said that right at the beginning, and all my crypto friends told me I was an idiot, but apparently I wasn't.
Well, if you tried to say that, 6 months earlier, I think you'd be met with a lot more flack. But now you might
Yeah,
get away with,
exactly.
you'll be let off the hook softly this time, Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't want to bring up the holy wars around that.
Yeah,
I
I
can't say that.
I couldn't help myself. Sorry.
I know. So next thing I came across was a example POC kind of exporting all your GitHub event data into ClickHouse. Haven't used ClickHouse personally much. Came across it first back when Sentry jumped ship to start using it. So this just piqued my interest a little bit more in it, seeing how easily one could query data, time series data from GitHub from a ClickHouse database.
So, am I missing this, or like, can you actually get it? You can't get the historical data from the GitHub API, right? You have to have been sending it to.
Yeah,
them?
streaming to ClickHouse, basically. You
Yeah.
start if you start ingesting it now, you can start getting interesting things tomorrow.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was making sure I didn't misunderstand that there was some historical way to get past events.
Yeah, no.
Wait, could we one-on-one a little bit more? I'm sorry, I don't know what ClickHouse is.
Oh, ClickHouse is I'm not sure. Are they open source? It's a time series database. ClickHouse.
I think of like InfluxDB as being something similar.
Yeah. Back in the day, are you familiar with Sentry? I thought it used to be Get Sentry.io. It's a exception tracking service that you can embed a Java.js code, and it'll send over all your exceptions to this service, so you can track if your apps are having problems tied to some release or things like that. It was pretty novel when it came out. These days, every service out there of similar caliber does it, Datadog, New Relic, etc. But Sentry started in open source and was based on Postgres. There was a major shift, I think, between Sentry 9 and Sentry 10, where they moved from Postgres to ClickHouse. And that was my first introduction to it, just generally. There are so many of these types of databases. I'm not going to be the best to justify why this one stands out, other than it has a SQL-like interface to it, and it's optimized for storing, streaming high cardinality data.
Yeah, thanks for that one-on-one. I had no idea that ClickHouse was a thing.
Yeah, let's see if ClickHouse. I know that
I believe it
like,
is. It has some open house pieces,
it
or
is
open
definitely
source.
open source. It's the open source. The thing you were just looking at is like the hosted, the hosted version of it that they commercialize.
Okay.
I've deployed it a couple times in the past, so if you have any like questions about that. I mean, I used it for a Grafana system where we replaced it with, Whisper. We moved it all to ClickHouse as the back end with a Go. I think it was using a statsd Go server for collecting.
Does ClickHouse support something like an S3 backend? It looks like it does.
I mean,
Oh,
I don't
that's
see why you couldn't
super
change the
cool.
code to do so.
Oh no, it looks like it supports it out of the box.
That's nice.
That's
Yeah,
that
I know it's
makes a lot
pluggable.
more sense.
So it's going to be similar to Postgres in the same way of like, can Postgres read Python? Well, I mean, there's a way to do it. There's somebody's already made something to do it.
Yeah. All right. Next announcement. Do I have any? Yeah, this was one you dropped by the Office Hours channel, Vlad. I was super excited to see this. So, well, we've it's come up a few times now in Office Hours how to improve Docker builds on GitHub Actions when you're doing self-hosted GitHub Actions. And Vlad, you shared a version that used S3 for caching, but I believe it had a patched Docker core or something. Do you have any article with this announcement? I'd be really curious because this is something we want to implement ASAP if this is now available.
I haven't seen any. I was just linking to the release notes for buildkit and buildx. I assume it's well documented, but I haven't implemented or tested the mainline version yet. I did have a client that was running the patch and there were no significant issues. Like it just worked.
Mm. And there were no significant issues
Nope.
when you were
Zero
using it.
issue, worked super smoothly. And there was also the article. There was a Substack, but it was Substack. Hold on, let me find
I just DM'd you, Eric. Open that
Okay.
in our regular Slack.
Okay, got it. Yeah, well, sorry, I was just on this page. I was trying to find the announcement though.
Oh,
Which
I don't
one
know if
talked more
they.
about it.
Yeah, I don't know if they announced it, but there's the doc of actually like how to just do it.
That's cool.
Seems
That's cool. Going to. All right. Let's see, what else did you say? Among others, any of the other features stand out that you can think of off the top of your head, Blood?
Depends what you care about. There's the software bill of materials and the other. If you look into the Slack Office Hours channel, there is a link to the release notes that actually says it, which is, let me find it. It was software bill of materials and the other thing which is closely related to that, which was
Oh, you actually had linked here to the
provenance certification. Yes, SLCA format supported, which is nice, and a bunch of other changes. For me, the S3 cache was the big one.
Yeah, super excited about that. That makes it much more viable to run Docker builds on self-hosted GitHub Actions.
And there was another announcement that I also linked in the Slack channel, which is that AppRunner now has a native integration with Secrets Manager and SSM parameter store, or whatever it's called, which was nice. Like AppRunner continues to get better and better and grow. I like that.
Yeah, I think they're doing what it appears to me is that AWS is doing some sort of iterative pass to strengthen their security posture. So they integrated like RDS, I think, with Secrets Manager, I think that we talked about before, and now they're doing this. I think they're going through like all the places that where really people thought it was a rough edge where you had to, get some sort of credential in plain text and then like pass it back. And they're now doing native integrations for them all. Or at least I've seen several things on the roadmap now that seem to make that seem to be the case.
Yeah. Let's see here, checking out the Zoom chat here. Yusuf is sharing, there was another security incident with Circle CI. Any secrets that you had stored in the platform should be rotated. Yikes. Thanks for sharing that one, Yusuf.
You should have an easy plan to do that because you should be doing that regularly anyway.
Oh yeah, exactly. Instead of doing it quarterly, just do one more now, right?
Exactly.
Oh, Alex, you used ChatGPT to create a GitHub Actions CI pipeline, and it actually worked.
Yeah, it was like 80 like it worked out of the box, but it was like 80% there from a quality standpoint. I was pretty impressed. It's a simple pipeline for like a simple use case. I need to run some tooling to verify JSON schemas or to verify like files against a JSON schema. And it was able to just kind of like, as long as you give it like intelligent inputs, it made a working output, which I did the same thing with the Terraform module, but it didn't follow any standards like Cloud Posse does. It was not great. So it still should have worked, but
I'll be really impressed when their ChatGPT answers include Terraform modules by Cloud Posse.
Just needs it trained.
Yeah.
I tried that. I tried what Alex tried as well for a couple of things. And the one thing that I found a little bit strange was that the versions of actions that it chose was like, seemed to be just completely random. Like if you asked it to do something, like sometimes it would pick like version 1 of the GitHub checkout action, and sometimes it would pick version 3 of the GitHub checkout action, like seemingly with no rhyme or reason. Like, so you start having to like instruct it like which version of things you wanted to use or whatever in order for it to start following your stuff. And then at some point you're almost just writing like the prose version of the action in order to get it to generate like the action that you want it to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I was like 80% there. Like it had the right idea. You don't want to like it's like don't blindly pipe things to pseudo bash, right? Like, read through it, like fix the small things it didn't get right, like update the versions and stuff. But it's an impressive project. So
yeah, I mean the scary thing is that that and you have enough knowledge to be able to do that. What scares me is all the junior folks out there that write that and then just take what it does, copy and paste it and start running it, and yikes.
maybe
like,
maybe there needs to be a GitHub action that can validate whether a PR was generated by ChatGPT. You can have ChatGPT tell you.
Yeah, how would it know? It's got to embed like some. It's got to embed some like some sort of like secret passcode in there somewhere that lets
it just needs to look for totally random versions of GitHub Actions. And then I'm joking.
I think a teacher did that actually.
Yeah, it was based on, you're right, Linda. It was based though on the length of the sentences being varied enough, and I forget what the other dimension was.
Yeah, but that's analysis of prose, right? Which is a lot harder to do than code, right?
Yeah, or harder or easier. In this situation, maybe easier to do.
I
to
don't
determine generatedness, so to say.
Yeah, I think the big thing became one of the things that they used for that was like grade level analysis of like what their writing grade level was at. And sometimes there was a mismatch and they could figure it out that way too. I read that.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into Q&A here.
1 second.
Yep.
Small announcement, just in case
Yeah, go for it.
any of you were expecting for it. There is not going to be a scaling container on AWS in 2023. So don't expect an updated benchmark.
Really? You've already written it off? You're not going to do the scaling containers in AWS by ChatGPT?
No, sorry.
All right. Well, understandable. Those are a monumental effort. You have to pass the torch to someone.
But I was just gonna reach out about hiring you to write an updated version in 2023, but I guess you said no already.
Yeah, maybe
Life is cruel.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, Q&A. Any questions out there? I didn't see any in our Slack channel.
I don't have a question, but I have an ask.
Okay, go for it.
This is Pepe, by the way. So I asked a question in the Terraform channel about drift detection. I'm basically gathering feedback and ideas. Some of you know I'm a Atlantis maintainer, and there is a new group of maintainers that are very, very active and creating pretty interesting new features in Atlantis. And one of them has volunteered to work on implementing drift detection through due to an intent from a company that created a GitHub action that interacts with the API in Atlantis. So the process, you can actually do drift detection right now if you use that GitHub action from the Cresta team is called. But it's very janky. There's a lot of things you have to do. It's not very straightforward. And the idea will be that, you know, hopefully we will have like an API call that will actually do the drift detection. If I find the drift detection, then it will create a PR for you automatically. If you wanted to auto-apply it, it will do the auto-remediation for you, but you will get a PR that it will be auto-merged with the drift detection, you know, solved basically. So if you have ideas and if you have worked with other tools and you would like to see something different done, maybe another type of notification or whatever, let me know so we can maybe put it on the backlog for that feature when it comes out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Pepe, but Atlantis has introduced now a dependency. It might be optional based on functionality, but a dependency on a backend data store of some kind.
And not a dependency is optional. You can use Redis if you want for locking, but that's only for locking.
Only for locking.
That's correct.
Oh, that's what they did. So you could have HA or scale.
In double quotes, yes. You still have that. You still need a shared storage. So if you're working in AWS, you can use EFS. And some people have reported that it works, but in really big, humongous monorepos, it's very slow in EFS. So you need to get crafty there to get there.
Even when you scale the IOPS, it's too slow.
Some people have reported issues with, you know, monorepos of 600 gigs or that. Okay. So obviously when you get to that point, you have other issues.
yeah. Facebook was struggling to use Atlantis.
That's right. But most of the people that have implemented it have reported that it works really well. So you can potentially have multiple Atlantis servers running right now due to that feature.
Because I think that's the biggest limitation to Atlantis. I mean, so first of all, I love that Atlantis has had zero dependencies or backing services required really to operate, right? That's what contributed a large part to its success. I think that it's kind of reached the limitations of how far you can take that without starting to introduce some kind of a backend store. And then once you do that, it's a whole new frontier of functionality that can be introduced into Atlantis.
Yeah, exactly. Although there have been people that have reported, I cannot mention names, but that they work with about 600 PRs a week with one Atlantis instance. I'm talking about a really big company, and without locking, without any HA. So Yeah, so it is possible, but obviously, when you get to a requirements of this HA for all your production workflows, then Atlantis doesn't pass that check if you're just using one instance. So it opens up to have the opportunity to get HA, obviously.
I was trying to find. There's sorry, go on, Matt.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask if I'd be curious what hardware that one instance is running on, if you happen to have that information.
I can ask, yes. I think it was 16 cores, but I don't know how much memory.
Yeah, I was presuming it was something very large in order to be able to handle that.
Yeah, especially with very big plans, the memory in Atlantis goes up, although there has been improvements recently, like literally last week, that improved quite a lot the rendering of the plans and all that kind of stuff. So it could
and then you obviously get incremental use with 600 potential PRs. You obviously have a ton of people who are logging onto the UI and looking at stuff and interacting with it and doing all of that kind of thing at the same time. So I was figuring that the combination of those two things would have to be a pretty beefy box to handle that.
Yeah, definitely.
Just made me think about this alternative open source tool to Atlantis that has taken kind of a more modern UX approach. I thought they used to have screenshots. Maybe it's on the doc site. I believe TerraCube had a somewhat of a Terraform Cloud looking UI in front of it.
Yeah, the Atlantis UI is, as you know, you can run it on a phone, like a 10-year-old phone, because it's so light. I mean, it's so basic. I wish that we had more options there, but PRs are welcome if someone wants to revamp the website or add more stuff to the UI. So all that's welcome.
Yeah, here you can kind of see one of the screenshots from TerraCube. So you can be broken down to multiple workspaces. You can inspect the plan through the UI here, the states and so forth. So it's kind of like a stripped down, simplified Terraform Cloud alternative, self-hosted. Has a built-in registry, it looks like, as well. But I have no idea what the adoption looks like, and still very small in terms of stars, it looks like. And 4 human contributors, it looks like. No, 3 human contributors. Java. All right. What else? Any other questions? Oh, okay. So for Pepe's question, suggestions that have been brought up to Pepe were like driftctl as one source. Obviously, there's Spacelift has implemented drift detection. Terraform Cloud has implemented drift detection. Someone else shared a simple GitHub action workflow for drift detection. I don't see the link here. Oh, here it is, Taco Forum, this one here. Any other examples of well-built drift detection, or any examples? All right. We'll open the floor up to new questions. Any other questions? Oh, Alex Siegman asks, curious on experiences or integrations with EKS, if so. Wait, I stopped. I didn't read in the beginning. Yeah. Question on experience. Has anyone used Amazon ECR as an OCI compliant repository for Helm charts? Yeah, it's been on my bucket list. We haven't started doing it yet. I know it supports it.
Yeah, like the Hello World examples all look pretty straightforward. Like we have need to version a couple of Helm charts ourselves now, and just looking for options, and this just seemed like a really easy option that we didn't have to host anything.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if like anyone had production experience with it, and could
The-
recommend or throw up some red flags.
One of the initial things that held us up, but that support for that was added to Terraform, as Terraform didn't support the OCI Helm charts, but now it does support it, I believe.
It does. And I know that the official Carpenter chart actually just recently moved over there because the fact that the chart URL changed threw us for a loop on on something between versions that we didn't realize. And then as I dug into things and pulled it apart, that's what I realized had happened. So that seems to be working pretty well. Obviously, we're not publishing that, but we're consuming it, and it doesn't seem to be any issue once you get that all worked out.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, as I said, it seems pretty straightforward. Looks like it would integrate well with, you know, if you're using ECAS or whatever. So maybe I'll give it a go.
Jeremy White's asking, anybody have experience using webauthn? What's webauthn, Jeremy?
It's a interesting passwordless way of doing authentication that basically it's a certificate exchange, and it includes support for biometrics. Or if your device doesn't have biometrics, then instead it will form a signature from the machine itself. And with the idea being that you can't really move those credentials to another device. Instead, if you want to use another device, you have to authenticate that device separately. So it's kind of a it's just a different authentication scheme that I haven't seen supported in a lot of places, but it seems like it's gotten a lot easier to implement. So
now, when you mention it, it sounds familiar, but yeah, I've never seen a system that allowed me to authenticate that way.
yeah,
The way I've heard it explained is that it's basically the back end that's implied if you're going to use a system that uses FIDO, or like what Apple and Microsoft and some of those are talking about with passkeys. This is the back end for that.
Yeah.
Are they literally implemented with it or metaphorically implemented with it? Are they literally using webauthn, or are they implementing their own version of something similar to?
What I've heard people talk about is that, yeah, in order for a user experience, essentially a front end on a mobile device or a browser to use a FIDO or passkeys UX, it has to have a webauthn backend.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
That sounds right. I haven't played with it, but it is kind of a nice thing in the sense that, you know, if you wanted to have fingerprints for your credentials, then you just need to find a way to basically securely store the certificates on the other side. I think that's effectively what the backend has to translate into, secure storage.
All right. Is this something that like Cognito supports? I'd be curious.
Huh. It'd be interesting to see. Well, AWS has an article about just that.
Related to Cognito, yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. So hey, you could be using the fingerprint scanner on your Mac to issue your pseudo commands from ChatGPT.
It all comes together. Cool. Let's open the floor up. Anyone else have questions we can help answer today or discuss?
I guess I have one. Has anybody for GitHub actions in our workflow for our Terraform workflow? We are trying to come up with a way to gate production, and we're really having a hard time figuring that out on how you would gate it when we're not using like a branching strategy, we're just using the main, you know, not long-lived branches and everything that goes to main goes up through as it gets approved through testing and all the way up, and we're having a hard time figuring out how to gate production.
So the
Anyway,
answer you're probably not looking for is upgrading to GitHub Enterprise, because then you can do it built into GitHub Actions with environment protection rules. It's natively supported. Everything else is going to be a hack.
I don't think you need enterprise for that anymore. I think it's just team.
Really?
Am I crazy? I
No,
thought
you
so.
still need enterprise.
Is it?
You must use pro team. For environments, you need that, but see, deploying version private. You must use, okay, but for protection rules.
The second to last sentence in the green thingy at the top. For access to other environment protection rules in private or internal repository, you must use GitHub Enterprise.
yeah, private internal. All right. Well,
yeah. So short of that, you're going to use something, a step that runs as part of your workflow that is just going to look at your at the person who performed the action and either, you know, exits or proceeds,
or looks at some third-party state that you can update at once an approval takes place, like, you know, write something to like a database row, or, you know, get a token from Slack or do something in order to gate it. But there isn't an easy way without environments.
so then I guess that explains why we're struggling as much as we are, because there's no easy way of doing it.
Yeah.
And alternative is to use like a comment on a PR to trigger a workflow. Of course, the authorization domain is the same as someone who can write to, right? So it'd be a manual trigger, but it wouldn't be necessarily something that you can have a distinct authentication domain for, or authorization domain for. So that's one approach, but really, I think you should really think hard about GitHub Enterprise, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was our,
So
like,
Jim-
my last conversation was, do we just go to GitHub Enterprise and use the environments?
There is one other option. It's a deprecated project that you'd have to kind of or re-implement or fork, but it did this. It sat on top of the GitHub environments API or deployments API, and it lets you trigger deployments on any particular commit, which is really nice. Unfortunately, the project was orphaned and hasn't gone anywhere.
But I actually, excuse me, I actually don't think that that it did automate those things, but I don't think it actually prevented you from being able to deploy one of those environments.
Yeah, so it was a self-hosted Node.js app that you would have had to add some protection rules on who could click those buttons. But it's an app that you host, so you could do it.
My point, sorry, maybe I'm not making it. My point is that it didn't restrict the deployment to particular environments. So if you could call the GitHub API as an example, you could still, like, if you could click the same people who could click the button basically could circumvent it if they wanted to by calling the API.
Yeah, you're not. Well, yeah. So it's using single sign-on with GitHub, right?
Right.
So
it uses your
credentials
your personal
credentials. So
yeah.
You can use Atlantis too, huh? Just so you know.
You know what? You said Atlantis. I was just looking at that actually.
Yeah, you can REST OPA tools to actually limit users and things like that. So.
Sorry for the background noise.
Well, thanks.
For what it's worth, I'm working on a project right now for a customer to do this to do exactly what you said in GitHub Actions, and even with Enterprise, there are lots of tricks and caveats and everything else. So this is not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, that's true. Well, looks like we are at time for today. So thanks everyone for joining us for another session of our office hours. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, just go to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, youtube.com/cloudposse. Thanks everyone for participating and sharing your insights and answers to the problems we had today. If you're interested in participating in the next office hours, go to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. We also syndicate our office hours as a podcast. If you go to podcast.cloudposse.com, you can catch up on all the back episodes in audio form. And if you want to connect with me, go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman to connect. Again, linkedin.com/in/Osterman. For those who are interested in Cloud Posse and what we can do for you and your business, how you can conquer AWS, go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, cloudposse.com/quiz. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye.